There is no pipe running to this spot, no well, no rain. It has not rained in 4 days. And yet look here, at the bottom of this screen I have leaned up in the yard, water. Beads of it running down the mesh and dripping slow and steady into the trough below. Clean water pulled right out of the open air overnight, while I slept. And the thing that is catching it cost me about $12 to build, out of parts from one trip to the hardware store. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish, and I farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I have spoken to you before about catching the rain that falls free from the sky. Today I want to show you something even older and stranger. How to catch the water that is in the very air around you, even when no rain is falling at all. Now, I am going to be honest with you right at the start, the way I always am, because this is a thing that gets badly oversold on the internet, and I will not be a part of that. This is real, it is ancient, and it is a wonder. But how much water you get depends enormously on where you live and what the air is doing. And I am going to tell you plainly the difference between the modest amount most folks will catch and the large amount only some folks in the right places will catch. I would far rather you build this knowing the truth and be pleased than build it expecting a river and be disappointed. This is not my people's invention. It belongs to the whole world, and to a great many old peoples. But it lives by the rule my grandfather lived by. Waste nothing, not even the water hanging invisible in the air. Stay with me. Let me start with the simple fact that makes this possible, because you already know it. You have seen it your whole life and just never thought to use it. The air around you, everywhere, all the time, is carrying water. Not rain, invisible water vapor floating in the air. You cannot see it, but it is there, and you have watched it come out of the air 1,000 times. The cold glass of water on a summer day that goes wet and beaded on the outside. That water did not leak through the glass. It came out of the air because the air touched something cold. The dew on the grass every single morning, soaking your boots before the sun climbs. Nobody poured that on. It came out of the air overnight. The spider's web heavy with droplets at dawn. The same thing every time. Here is the rule behind it. There is a temperature they call the dew point. When the air touches a surface that is colder than that point, the water vapor in the air cannot stay vapor anymore. It has nowhere to go but out. It turns to liquid, it condenses, it beads up, and it drips. That is all dew is. That is all the wet glass is. So what you are going to build is simply a big surface for that to happen on. A large area of fine mesh that cools down in the night air so that the water in the air passing by it has somewhere to land and let go. You tilt it so that as the droplets form, they run downhill by gravity into a trough at the bottom. No motor, no electricity, no moving parts. You set it up before bed and it works while you sleep, off nothing but the night air and the cool. Here is the parts list, and I want to be straight with you. This truly is all of it. You need a piece of fine mesh, about 6 feet by 6 feet. The shade cloth they sell at any garden center or hardware store works, and it costs around $5. Now here is the important part. The tighter the weave, the better. You want something closer to a window screen than to a loose net, because the mesh is doing all the real work. It is the surface the water forms on, so do not skimp on getting a fine, tight weave. You need 4 lengths of PVC pipe, the inch-wide kind, to make a frame to stretch the mesh on. A couple of dollars, and less if you have scrap lying about. You need zip ties, which you likely have in a drawer already. And you need a length of plastic gutter for the trough at the bottom to catch the water, $3 or $4, and a few bricks or rocks to prop it at the right angle, which you surely have lying around. That is $8 to $14 all told. No special tools beyond something to cut the PVC, and the hardware store will often cut it for you for nothing if you ask kindly. Now let me show you how to put it together, because there are a few small things that make all the difference between catching water and catching nothing. First, the frame. You join your 4 PVC lengths into a rectangle, roughly 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide. You are not building furniture. It just needs to hold its shape and stand up to a little wind without folding. Zip tie the corners if you do not want to fuss with fittings. It will hold fine. Then you stretch your mesh across that frame, and here's the key. Pull it tight. Tight as a drum skin. You zip tie it down every 6 inches all the way around, pulling out every sag as you go. And why so tight? because a sagging mesh lets the water pool in the low spots instead of running down. And pooled water just sits there and evaporates away when the sun comes up and you collect nothing. A tight mesh sheds every drop down to the trough, so pull it drum tight. Now the single most common mistake, the one nearly everyone makes the first time, they lay the thing flat on the ground, like a table. Do not do that. Flat means the water pools on top and burns off in the morning sun, and you get almost nothing. You must tilt it. Lean it at an angle, somewhere between 15 and 30 degrees off straight up, like a screen leaned against a wall at a shallow lean. Tilted, every droplet that forms rolls down by itself, reaches the bottom edge, and drips off into the trough. Set your gutter trough right under that low edge to catch the drips, and prop the whole thing up on your bricks. Now the placement, which matters far more than folks think, so listen close to these three. First, face it into the wind, not sideways to the breeze, not with its back to it, but straight into it. You want the air moving through the mesh, not sliding around the outside of it, because it is the air passing through and touching all those cool fibers that gives up its water. Go out at dusk and feel which way the breeze is coming from and point the front of your frame right at it. Second, get it up off the ground a little. Even a foot up makes a real difference, because the air right down at ground level tends to be drier and a touch warmer, and what you want is the cooler, damper air that sits a little higher. And third, keep it out of where the morning sun hits first. You want the dew to gather all through the night and still be sitting in your trough when you come out at dawn, not burned off by the first sunbeam before you are even awake. A shaded spot on the west side of something the morning sun reaches last is ideal. And one more small thing that helps if you want to squeeze a bit more from it. The colder the mesh gets, the more the air gives up to it. So a metal threaded screen or a mesh with a little fine wire worked through it will pull a touch more than plain cloth, because the metal sheds its warmth to the night sky faster and goes colder than cloth alone. It is not a great difference, and plain shade cloth works fine, but if you have the choice, the cooler the surface, the better it drinks. That is the whole secret of the thing in one sentence. Make a big, cold, tilted surface and stand it in the moving night air, and the water will find it. Set it up before sunset. Come back at first light. That is the whole routine. While you sleep, the temperature drops, the mesh goes cold, the air passing through crosses that dew point, and the water comes out and runs down into your trough. Something for nothing by morning. Now here is the honest part, the part I promised you, and the part the breathless videos always skip, because it is the difference between being pleased and being fooled. There are really two different things going on here, and how much water you get depends entirely on which one you have where you live. The first is plain dew, what forms on an ordinary clear, cool night, the same dew that wets your grass. A mesh like this on an average night with no fog will give you a modest amount. Realistically, somewhere from a cupful to maybe a quart or two from a screen this size. Enough to be real, enough to be a help, enough to keep a person going in a pinch, but not enough to supply a whole household. On my first night in middling conditions, I caught a bit over half a quart. That is honest, and that is what most of you, in most places, on most nights, will get. It is a genuine, free, useful trickle. It is not a faucet. The second thing is fog, and this is where the big numbers come from. If you live where real fog rolls in, along a coast, down in a river valley, up in the mountains where the clouds come down and sit, that is a different matter entirely. Fog is not just damp air. It is air already full of tiny water droplets, and when that fog blows through your mesh, the mesh combs the water right out of it, and the yield can be many times greater. Gallons, not cups, from a screen this size on a good foggy night. The famous water catchers of the world, the ones in the dry coastal mountains of Chile and in Morocco and in the Canary Islands, they are catching fog, not mere dew, and that is why they can water whole villages. So here is the plain truth, and I want it to be the thing you remember. If you live in foggy country, this can be a serious source of water, and you should scale it up and take it seriously. If you live where it is just ordinary humid or dry, this is a modest, free supplement. a fine thing to know, a real help in a dry spell or a hard time, a wonderful thing to teach your children, but not your whole water supply. Anyone who tells you a little screen in the dry backyard will water a family of 4 is selling you a dream. Know which one you have, build for it, and you will not be disappointed. I will tell you the morning that made a believer of me. We had a stretch one September where a heavy river fog would settle in the low ground behind the barn near every night and not lift till the sun was well up. I had my screen out down there, more from curiosity than anything, and one morning I walked down at first light and the trough was near overflowing. Better than 2 gallons off one screen, off one night, from air that had not dropped a lick of rain. I stood there in the wet grass and just looked at it, for I had read that fog would do this, but reading a thing and seeing 2 gallons of clean water that the night simply handed you are 2 different matters. Now I will not pretend every morning is like that, for it is not, and on a plain dry night that same screen gives me a cup, and I am glad of the cup. But that foggy morning showed me the truth of it, that where the conditions are right, this is no toy and no trick. It is real water, and a real living can be wrung out of the air by a man who knows how. Now let me speak about drinking it, because this matters, and I will not gloss over it. Water from the air starts out fairly clean, cleaner in some ways than water from the ground, because it has not run through soil or pipes, so it skips a great deal of what fouls surface water. But it is not pure just because it fell out of the air. It can pick up dust off the mesh, and if you are near a road or a town or any industry, it can carry traces of whatever is in that air. So you do not just drink it straight from the trough and trust it. You clean it first. Always. The simple old filter is easy, and it costs about nothing. Take a plastic bottle, cut the bottom off, and turn it upside down so the neck points down. Inside, you layer it from the neck up. First, a wad of cotton cloth, then a layer of activated charcoal, the kind from the pet store, the same charcoal I've spoken of before. Then a layer of clean, fine sand. Then another wad of cotton on the top. Pour your collected water in the top and let it drip slow out the neck into a clean jar. That catches the dust, and the charcoal pulls out most of what you cannot see. And then, to be truly safe, especially if you will give it to children, or you are anywhere near a town, you finish it. The surest way is to boil it a good few minutes, because boiling kills what a filter cannot. Filter it, then boil it, and you have water as clean as any from the tap, and likely cleaner. Do not skip that step out of laziness. Free water is a blessing, but only if it does not make your family sick. Honest is better than careless every single time. Now I want to take a moment, because this is the part that matters, and it is older than you think. Men have been doing this for a very long time. Long before there was a pipe running to a house, people in the dry lands built things to wring the water out of the air and the fog. There are old stone structures up in the high places of South America that were built, the learned folk now believe, not to hold water, but to make it, to gather the mountain fog. There are fog nets that have watered islands for generations. There are ancient works out in the desert that puzzled people for ages until they realized those were built to catch the dew. The knowledge is old, and it is spread all over the world among the people who had no choice but to be clever about water. And then, somewhere in the last 100 years, as the pipe came to every house and the tap simply worked, we stopped. We did not need it, so we forgot it. The old knowing did not die. It just got set on a high shelf and left to gather dust, because the tap was easier and somebody else was handling it. And here is the quiet truth about why you never heard of it. It is not that it was hidden away by villains. It is simpler than that, and almost worse. There is no money in it. A man who leans a $12 screen in his yard and catches his own water owes nobody anything and buys nobody's product ever again. You cannot sell a monthly bill for the dew. You cannot put a brand on the night air. So nobody advertises it, and nobody teaches it, and a whole people forgot that the air itself is full of water, free for the catching. The companies will gladly sell you a machine that does this with a motor and a fan for $3,000, but they will never once tell you that a spider's web does the same thing for free. And think on that spider a moment, for she is the whole lesson. She does not run a motor. She does not pay a bill. She simply strings a fine, still net across the path of the night air, and by morning it is hung with more water than her whole body could hold, and she drinks and she lives. She has been doing it since long before the first man ever dug the first well. All you are doing with your $12 screen is the very same thing the spider does, only bigger, and with a trough at the bottom to save what she lets fall. There is nothing new under the sun in this. There is only remembering. My people never lost the habit, because we never fully gave ourselves over to the pipe and the bill in the first place. A family that can catch its own water from the rain and even from the air is a family that is harder to put in a corner. That is the whole of it. The water is up there in the air right now, over your head, more of it than in all the rivers on the earth, and almost nobody is catching it. You can be one of the few who does. So here is what I want you to do. This weekend, make one trip to the hardware store. A piece of fine, tight shade cloth mesh, 4 lengths of inch PVC, a bit of plastic gutter. You have the zip ties and the bricks already. $12, give or take. Build the frame. Stretch the mesh drum tight. Tilt it 15 to 30 degrees. Point it into the evening wind. Set the trough beneath the low edge and prop it up off the ground in a spot the morning sun reaches last. Set it out before sunset and go to bed. Come out at first light and see what the night gave you. And remember the honest truth as you do it. A cup or a quart on an ordinary night. Real water, but a modest help. And gallons only if you live where the fog comes. Build it for the water you actually have, and filter and boil before you drink. Do that, and you will have caught water out of thin air with your own 2 hands for $12, the way clever people have done it for 1,000 years. Tell me down in the comments, do you live where the fog rolls in or where the air runs dry? And if you build one of these, come back and tell me what you caught on the first night and in what kind of weather. Because the more of you who report your conditions and your results, the more all of us learn what works where. I read every single one, and that sharing is the whole reason I do this. Next time, since we have been speaking of water, I'm going to show you the old way my family stores the water we catch so it stays sweet and clean for months without going stale or growing anything. The cool, the dark, the covered crock and the cistern, the way it was kept before there was ever a tap. It is the natural next step after today. Until then, catch what the air gives you, waste nothing, and remember that the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only now just starting to remember.